Man, I had to go outside and go for a walk before I did this video to cool off. And I'm still pissed off. I'm still pissed. This was straight up sabotage. Stephanie White, you are a bum. Aaliyah Boston, you are even more of a bum. You are a $6 million piece of garbage out there. Your ass can't make a layup. You refuse to pass the ball to Caitlin Clark. You stink. You stink. You've been intentionally not passing the ball to Caitlin Clark for the last 7-8 games. We've been watching and counting. I've been watching your ass not pass her the ball. You can't make a layup to save your life. You just as garbage.
She spun away and headed straight from the bench while the building descended into chaos. Caitlin Clark appeared to hit her absolute limit after Indiana suffered a painful 91-85 defeat to the Dallas Wings, and the frustration was impossible to miss. Stephanie White remained on the sideline watching the scene unfold as the tension between coach and star suddenly became visible to everyone. This was bigger than simply dropping a road game against a Dallas team that had lost 8 of its previous 11 contests. The loss felt like the moment weeks of frustration, questionable decisions, and simmering disagreements finally burst into the open. What had previously been hidden behind controlled interviews and carefully chosen public comments now looked like a full-scale internal conflict threatening to rip the Fever apart.
Kelsey Mitchell in it. She played a hell of a game, but this thing was 100% about Kelsey Mitchell, and I think it had everything to do with them seeing Caitlin Clark climbing that MVP ladder, and they said, hell no, we are sabotaging this, and that is exactly what happened. The Indiana Fever lose to a team in the Dallas Wings that lost 8 out of their last 11 games. You could thank Stephanie White, who wanted to make it all about Kelsey Mitchell. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit the bell notification, hype the video. That'd be greatly appreciated, man. I am disgusted with the Indiana Fever. I am disgusted.
The warning signs appeared almost immediately. On Indiana's opening possession, White's designed action went directly through Kelsey Mitchell, rather than using Clark as the main creator. Clark followed the call and made the correct basketball play, slipping an unselfish bounce pass to Mitchell and helping send her to the free throw line. There was nothing wrong with that possession by itself, but it quickly became symbolic of how the entire night would unfold. Instead of mixing the offense and allowing both guards to initiate, Indiana repeatedly leaned toward Mitchell, while Clark spent long stretches functioning away from the center of the action. As the pattern continued, it became increasingly obvious to viewers that the player normally responsible for controlling Indiana's tempo and creating advantages was being moved out of the primary decision-making role.
Hype the video. That'd be greatly appreciated, man. I am disgusted with the Indiana Fever. I am disgusted. Stephanie White, get your bum ass in the trash. Get your bum ass in the trash. You are a fucking bum of a coach. You are terrible. You are terrible. You mean to tell me the very first play of the game was ran for Kelsey Mitchell? Caitlin Clark threw her a bounce pass. Kelsey Mitchell went to turn the corner, got fouled, went to the free throw line. From that point on, every single play in the first half was for Kelsey Mitchell. Nobody else could establish a rhythm because you did nothing else.
For people watching closely, the strategy became increasingly difficult to understand. Clark was gaining momentum nationally and moving rapidly up the league's MVP conversation because of the impact she had been making as a scorer and creator. Yet Indiana's approach against Dallas seemed to do everything possible to prevent her from establishing that same rhythm. Possession after possession flowed through Mitchell, while Clark was frequently positioned away from the ball, reducing the freedom and unpredictability that normally make the Fever dangerous. Instead of using both guards together and forcing the defense to make difficult decisions, Indiana appeared to narrow its attack and sacrifice overall offensive flow. Every trip down the floor seemed to add another layer of frustration, and the growing tension between the team's system and its biggest playmaker became increasingly visible.
You like by the time people got looks, they were in no rhythm. There was no rhythm by the time they actually got looks at the rim. Aaliyah Boston is trash. She does not set screens. You got people tackling Caitlin Clark. Aaliyah Boston, big, soft, sorry ass, don't do nothing. She's a big, soft, sorry piece of if you ask me out there. Aaliyah Boston is ass. $6 million of ass juice out there. She ain't did nothing. Got dominated by Jessica Shepard. Aaliyah Boston, get your sorry ass in the trash too. Go on.
The numbers from the opening half made the situation even harder to explain. Indiana reportedly did not run a pick and roll or traditional ball screen action specifically designed for Clark until roughly 15 seconds remained before halftime. For a player whose greatest strength is manipulating defenses with the ball in her hands, that level of inactivity was remarkable. Even away from the basketball, Clark received almost no meaningful screening action designed to create clean catches or movement opportunities until later in the game. Instead, one of the league's most dangerous offensive creators was repeatedly stationed around the perimeter, while other actions developed elsewhere. That removed much of her downhill pressure, reduced her ability to dictate matchups, and left her watching possessions rather than controlling them. With every wasted opportunity, the frustration seemed to rise closer to the surface.
Straight up bum. Stephanie White, you are the biggest piece of garbage, biggest piece of trash out there. Take a look at this. I'm glad. Look, Caitlin Clark is turning her back on Stephanie White. She's over it. Can we end this thing at the end of the season? Shout out to Kelsey. You played a good game. We're going to get into that. I want this thing broken up by the end of the season. You can't afford both. Pick one and let's move on. At this point, I'd rather y'all keep Kelsey, Stephanie, and AB together in Indiana, and let's let Caitlin go elsewhere. Can we go elsewhere, please? I just want to get the hell away from here. I want to get away from these weirdos. I want to get away from this sabotaging organization. I want to get away from everything. Take a look at this.
Stephanie White also appeared unable to stop the chemistry from deteriorating in front of her. Television cameras repeatedly showed White directing instructions toward Clark during stoppages and dead ball situations. But the visible coaching did not appear to be accompanied by adjustments that consistently created better opportunities for her star guard. Rather than redesigning possessions to generate space or easier touches, the same stagnant patterns continued. At several moments, White's body language appeared tense when Clark controlled the basketball, adding another uncomfortable layer to an already strained sideline dynamic. Whether those exchanges reflected ordinary competitive frustration or something deeper, the optics were terrible. As the game progressed, the distance between coach and superstar looked increasingly obvious, and the polished explanations normally offered after games were becoming much harder to reconcile with what viewers were seeing in real time.
Look at her. Look at her. Look at her. She don't want to hear it no more. Now look at Stephanie White when Caitlin Clark has the ball right here. She don't even want Caitlin to have the ball. She want Kelsey to have the ball. You see that reaction from the coach? You see that? They hate each other, and it's okay. I'll be glad when this thing is over. I will be glad when this thing is over. Get Caitlin Clark the hell away from this team. Get her the hell out of here, man. Caitlin Clark don't want nothing to do with Stephanie White, and Stephanie White don't want nothing to do with Caitlin Clark, which is fine. Can we stop this whole kumbaya thing, this fake thing? Stop standing.
The concerns surrounding Stephanie White's approach became even more pronounced when Indiana's front court actions were examined. Aliyah Boston, one of the franchise's most important pieces, repeatedly appeared to begin handoff sequences toward Clark before changing direction and moving the basketball toward Mitchell instead. Several possessions followed a similar pattern. Clark would prepare to receive the ball, Boston would turn toward her, and then the action would abruptly shift elsewhere. Regardless of whether those decisions were scripted or simply reads made during live play, the repeated result was the same. Clark was left without momentum and often forced to operate against defenders already prepared to trap or pressure her. Without consistent handoffs, screens, or interior actions forcing Dallas to respect multiple threats, the defense could aggressively crowd Clark on the perimeter with far less concern about being punished elsewhere.
Y'all had to go Kate for her at the podium. Y'all lost to a team that lost 8 out of their last 11 games. Caitlin Clark didn't play well. You shot 1 free throw. That shows me you had a lack of aggression. I felt like you checked out in the second quarter, to be honest. I watched you check out. They ran everything for Kelsey Mitchell. You came down the court. You wasn't even looking for no ball screens no more because you knew they wasn't coming. And you know once you pass the ball, you're never getting the ball back. You know that. If we all know it, you know it too. You know Aaliyah Boston don't give you the ball when you give it to her. You know when you go for the handoff with Aaliyah Boston, she's going to do this and then go the opposite way and give it to Kelsey. You know that.
Boston's screening also became a major point of criticism because Clark repeatedly faced heavy defensive pressure without consistently receiving the separation she needed. Dallas defenders were extremely physical around the perimeter, yet many of Indiana's screens failed to create enough contact or space to free Clark cleanly. At the same time, Clark continued delivering passes that produced high-quality opportunities around the basket, only for several of those chances to go unfinished. Those missed conversions magnified every other offensive problem, because successful interior finishing would have forced Dallas to reconsider how aggressively it defended Clark. Instead, Indiana struggled to establish a strong presence around the rim, and Jessica Shepard took advantage on the opposite end. Her success inside highlighted exactly how vulnerable the Fever looked physically, particularly when their own half-court offense was already struggling to generate consistent balance.
Game plan. Every game has been that. This girl body just shut down the last game, just like it did in the playoffs last year. And she plays 35 minutes. But she played well with her opportunities. They made it her a focal point They made it a point to get her established. They made it a point to get Kelsey a rhythm. And when she got that rhythm, she kept it going. They never made it a point to get anybody else a rhythm. Sophie Cunningham, 0-4 from 3. By the time Sophie Cunningham got to look at the rim, the game was almost over. She had no rhythm. No rhythm. Monique Billings sucks. The biggest crock of dog shit for $800,000. I don't know how she's getting 8. She sucks.
By the middle of the second quarter, Clark's entire demeanor seemed to change. After repeatedly watching possessions develop away from her, she stopped moving with the same urgency and appeared increasingly detached from Indiana's offensive rhythm. Rather than constantly hunting for actions that were rarely materializing, she began conserving movement, seemingly understanding that giving the ball up often meant waiting a long time before touching it again. The usual emotion and electricity associated with her game gradually gave way to a colder, more restrained presence. Her final numbers reflected just how uncomfortable the night became. 10 points, 9 assists, and 4 rebounds while shooting 4 of 15 from the field and 2 of 8 from three-point range. Perhaps even more striking, she attempted only 1 free throw, a dramatic contrast from the aggressive downhill pressure she is capable of creating when operating with rhythm. By the time she tried to become more forceful during the third quarter, she appeared to be searching for timing that had never been allowed to develop. Mitchell, meanwhile, produced a huge individual performance with 37 points on 9 of 18 shooting, while converting all 15 of her free throws. From a box score perspective, it looked like an incredible scoring night that nearly carried Indiana. The deeper concern, however, was whether concentrating so heavily on one scorer disrupted everyone else. Sophie Cunningham finished without a point and missed all 4 of her three-point attempts, often receiving touches without the rhythm that shooters normally need. Other rotation players, including Monique Billings, also struggled to influence the game, demonstrating how difficult it becomes for an offense to function when several players spend long stretches simply watching possessions happen. Dallas took full advantage. Eric Ugunbowale erupted for 32 points and repeatedly attacked Indiana's unstable defensive structure, while Jessica Shepard delivered an extraordinary performance, making 10 of 11 shots in the first half before finishing with 26 points and 8 rebounds. A Wings team that had dropped 8 of its previous 11 games played with greater cohesion and punished Indiana every time the Fever lost organization. Then came the moment that changed the entire tone of the night. During a second-half timeout, White approached Clark while apparently delivering another set of instructions. Clark turned away, raised her arms, and walked toward the opposite end of the bench instead of continuing the exchange. Whatever was actually being said between them, the visual was impossible to ignore. Teammates nearby appeared to recognize immediately how uncomfortable the interaction had become. For months, Clark had publicly supported her coaches and generally avoided turning disagreements into headlines, which made the moment feel especially significant. Suddenly, the image of complete internal harmony looked much less convincing. The broader concern now centers on whether Indiana's leadership is maximizing the player around whom the franchise's future is clearly being built. White was hired with the expectation that she could push this roster closer to championship contention while unlocking Clark's rare combination of scoring and playmaking. When the offense instead leaves Clark disconnected for long periods, every decision surrounding the system naturally comes under heavier scrutiny. The backcourt balance with Mitchell only makes the challenge more complicated. Mitchell is an elite scorer capable of producing enormous numbers, but Indiana still has to create an offensive structure where her strengths complement Clark, rather than forcing the two into competing styles. If those philosophies cannot coexist, the organization eventually faces difficult decisions about exactly what identity it wants long-term. Questions also extend to Boston and the rest of the front court. As one of Indiana's foundational players, Boston is expected to provide dependable finishing, physical screening, interior defense, and a consistent two-player connection with Clark. When routine opportunities around the basket are missed and screens fail to generate separation, the consequences ripple through every possession. That combination of problems made the Dallas loss feel far more serious than an ordinary 6-point defeat. Losing to a struggling opponent is damaging enough, but doing it while displaying obvious frustration and disconnected body language creates an entirely different level of concern. Throughout the fourth quarter, Indiana frequently looked like several individuals trying to solve the game separately, rather than 5 players functioning within one coherent system. If the coaching staff cannot rebuild trust and restore clarity, those fractures could threaten the Fever's postseason ambitions. Fans quickly responded online, circulating clips of missed cuts, ignored passing windows, stagnant possessions, and especially the sequence in which Clark walked away from White. The reaction grew rapidly, because many viewers believed they were watching a system failing to properly utilize one of the league's most influential players. That pressure now falls directly on Indiana's decision-makers. Clark already operates beneath enormous national attention, and functioning inside an offense that appears uncertain about how to use her only increases that burden. Her exhausted appearance after the game suggested frustration that went beyond one poor shooting night. Whether the issues are tactical, interpersonal, or simply the result of a badly executed game plan, Indiana cannot afford to ignore them. The front office now has to determine whether the current structure can be repaired quickly enough to protect the season and the franchise's long-term direction. If White's preferred approach does not consistently place Clark in positions where her vision, range, and playmaking can transform the offense, meaningful adjustments will have to come sooner rather than later. Dallas may ultimately be remembered as the game when those problems stopped being subtle. Indiana is approaching a defining crossroads. Fully align the system, personnel, and coaching philosophy around the talents of its franchise centerpiece, or risk allowing the tension surrounding the team to become the story itself. What happened against the Wings did not look like one random bad evening. It looked like the culmination of tactical frustration, uneven offensive priorities, and a superstar increasingly unhappy with how the game was unfolding around her. When the final horn sounded, the 91-85 score represented only part of the damage. The larger issue was the visible disconnect between players, strategy, and leadership that had finally spilled onto national television. If Stephanie White and Indiana's leadership fail to respond to that warning, the effects could extend far beyond one loss or one season. The fight over what this Fever team should become may only be beginning, and whatever follows could be monumental.